All right, folks, welcome to another episode of the Counter Media Podcast. We got a lot of things to talk about. Some of them are going to be extremely provocative, as they always are. But welcome, everybody. Welcome, everybody that is now watching live. And, of course, anybody that tunes in after this goes live. Make sure you start joining us again, we're going to try to be on a schedule. The plan is every Monday at 8 p.m. and every Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern time. What time is that for you in Australia, Chris?
That's 11 a.m.
11 a.m.
Gives me a little bit of a sleeping.
The days after that, right? So it's actually
right, it's Friday
morning there and Tuesday morning in Australia. Anything in the future that we need to know about taking place, Chris?
Yeah, everyone from Gaza's already been kicked out. It was happened quicker than I thought, but yeah.
Well, that freaking Shark Tank awfully quick.
Yeah.
Make sure you guys are liking, subscribing. I think most of the people over in the comments right now are, but we appreciate the likes. We appreciate the subscribes. And you know what? The other thing is we really appreciate the shares. If you guys can share and continue to help grow this podcast, we really appreciate that as well. And the same thing with the Dangerous Liberty podcast that we have every Wednesday at 7 p.m. But I do want to say hi to A.M. Atkinson Khan, John Rollins, Jason T.G. Sponsor, Michael Henn. Who else? Jason, TG sponsor there again. Wyatt Darrell, Robert Cochran, Metal Sear. Yeah. So anyways, Con's already asking. See, this is why you can't create an entitlement society. You start doing giveaways. You know what? I will start giving away portions of the Gaza Strip. We'll do that. I don't know how much legal authority I have in the Gaza, but we'll do that. Make sure those of you that did get one of the giveaway prizes, which was the book yesterday. Make sure you guys send us your actual address. And no, Jason TG sponsor, I do not need your address. I do not need Michael Henn's address. Those of you that we do business with on a regular basis, we don't need your address. So the more business you do with us, the less we need information you need to send us, because we have it on file. But we do have a lot to cover, and some of this is going to be controversial. Some of it's going to be definitely provocative. Anytime that we're talking about issues in the Middle East, and specifically Israel and Palestine, it is somewhat divisive. But my goal with this, and Chris and I spent a lot of time talking prior to the show, my goal with this is that we can somehow talk about these things in a respectful way. And it's a challenge when you're talking about Israel, period. And I think there's some valid reasons for that. Chris and I think are kind of on the opposite ends of our opinions on that situation. Not really even opinions, just, we'll get into some of those and discuss those differences. But I think Americans especially, we need to be able to have these discussions without, Chris and I are friends. We talk about these things. We bounce things off of each other. And, Chris feels very differently than I do about the situation in Israel. And you know what? That's okay. That's what America used to be about. I don't know what happened. And not just America, the world in general, the Western world specifically. If you're talking about something that somebody disagrees with, it's scorched earth and you're just a piece of crap and you're not worth listening to begin with. But we can't, that's just not how open discourse is supposed to be had. So we will definitely get into that. One of the big things I definitely want to talk about, and I didn't get to do nearly as much prep as I wanted to on this, but the USAID issue. There are many problems with USAID, and we'll talk about some of those things for sure. But Chris, you had some things that you pulled up for USAID as well. I'll just start off with a quote. This guy, if you're not following this guy on X, I think you definitely should. But I want to start off. And Paramount Actual on X. The other day I said this was February 4th. I said, USAID is the deep state HQ. They're a collection of unaccountable leftist bureaucrats, intel operatives, diplomats, and global strategists that come from the most American-hating segments of academia, all operating with impunity under the guise of humanitarian efforts. And I don't say that as a bystander, folks. I worked for the Department of State. I worked directly with USAID, I know what goes on with those programs. And one of the biggest things that USAID does is, and what I think essentially the USAID is, besides a cover for a lot of CIA initiatives, by the way, USAID is a global social engineering program. And especially when it comes to LGBTQ initiatives and things like that, they are going out there and doing aid, and they're working with different governments, and they're working with different provinces and things like that. But the other part, what they do is they attach to a lot of these social initiatives that most Americans, or at least a large segment of America, disagrees with. And, basically they're coercing people through aid to get into these, this woke stuff. I mean, that is a big part of what they've been doing for the last few years. And I got to tell you, one of the many things that really prompted me to leave the Department of State, because I had a great job. I was traveling all the time. Yeah, traveling is fun, but I also hated being away from the family. But man, it was sickening that under the Biden administration, that every embassy and consulate that I went to, right underneath the American flag was the gay pride flag, LGBTQ flag, whatever you want to call it. And these are in countries like Jordan, the Middle East, all over Africa. And they didn't care that the local governments, the local country found that extremely offensive. And even the local nationals, a large portion of the people that work at an embassy or consulate, those are local nationals. They're providing security, they're providing janitorial services, they're providing mechanical services for the extensive fleets of vehicles that the Department of State has at every embassy and consulate. And, these people did not like that at all. And, what the Biden administration specifically, or especially did, was shove these social ideologies that most Americans didn't even agree with down the throats of people abroad. And, the USAID was a big part of that. Some of just a few of the things that we can get into, we can talk about the waste, fraud, and abuse of USAID is, got it right here. Here's just a few examples of waste, and this is directly from the White House. And of course, DOGE is going after USAID severely, and I'm really glad that they are. But we have $1.5 million to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion in Serbia's workplaces and in business communities. $70,000 for production of DEI musical in Ireland. $2.5 million for electric vehicles for Vietnam. $47,000 for transgender opera in Colombia. $32,000 for transgender comic book. $2 million for sex changes and LGBT activism in Guatemala. $6 million to fund tourism in Egypt. Hundreds of thousands of dollars for a nonprofit linked to designated terrorist organization, even after an inspector general launched an investigation. Millions to EcoHealth Alliance. Hundreds of thousands of meals that went to Al-Qaeda affiliated fighters in Syria. Funding to print personalized contraceptive birth control devices in developing countries. Hundreds of millions of dollars to fund irrigation canals, farming equipment, and even fertilizer used to support the unprecedented poppy cultivation and heroin production in Afghanistan, benefiting the Taliban. So what you have is a collection of extremely powerful leftists that are pushing these political initiatives overseas that really do nothing for America prospering. These aren't, what the Department of State should be doing is, number one, helping keep the peace. But the other thing is that they are there to work on the behalf of America and America businesses to make sure that, we can operate freely, and we are getting as much advantage as the Department of State can provide for American businesses and the American way of life and American prosperity. And that's not what they've been doing for the last many years, but especially under the Biden administration, I saw that firsthand, where it was turned into a woke ideology, propaganda pushing machine with lots of money, power, and influence behind it. And it was a real shame to see that. And don't get me wrong, there are definitely some good people working at USAID, but they are by and far outnumbered by real political activists that you would see on and probably participate in a lot of BLM and Antifa and all this other stuff. And by the way, they just so happen to work for the U.S. government as well. And it's something that needs to be needs to be addressed. I'm glad to see that it's finally being addressed. The other part of that too is there's lots of I've just seen some recent articles how USAID was actually using tax-funded dollars to push articles during COVID and against Trump and with the Trump investigations and the Russia collusion hoax and all of that. So they are a political operative underneath the U.S. government, and it's not what they should be. It's not what they should be doing at all.
Yeah, I basically agree with most of that. It seems, I mean, they might do some good things. I remember seeing something just recently about a video from 4 years ago where Pompeo, I think we had fires in Australia, and I think USAID might have given us some legitimate sort of aid for that or whatever. But most of it is, yeah, some kind of soft power in some ways that are just like wasteful and annoying, like with the, spreading the pride flags and the transgender, this, that, and the other. But some of it's a bit more serious, like that list you had before, the meals to the Al-Qaeda affiliated fighters in Syria. That was basically going hand in hand with a regime change operation in Syria where they said Assad must go. We will, the CIA, I think it was called Timber Sycamore. Tulsi Gabbard mentioned it at her hearing. That was the CIA program to somehow support these Al-Qaeda fighters in Syria to overthrow the government. And the USAID is there hand in hand feeding them to help with these sort of regime change operations.
Yeah, and even when I was overseas, I loved my time at embassies and consulates, and there's some great people out there. But again, you'd even go to these parties and things like this, and people were just during the Trump administration, they were just openly against Trump and openly usurping and undermining Trump initiatives. It was a flat out rebellion during the Trump administration. They had no intent of pushing any of the Trump administration's initiatives or executive orders or wants and requirements of what they wanted out there. They were there to undermine the Trump administration at every step, and it was part of the resistance that we saw during that first Trump administration. And again, Elon Musk and most importantly Trump himself is absolutely right to go after these bureaucrats and these diplomats that are going overseas and completely it's like an insurgency within our own government, and it has to stop. That cannot be how it works. And look, I don't think that should be how it works if Biden was in office or Kamala was in office or during the Obama. I mean, the executive branch has the authority to push the initiatives that they want. And then it's up to the American people to decide if that's what they want to do. So as long as it's legal and as long as it's not corrupt, you got to follow the executive order, the executive branch orders, and what they want to, how they want to preside and govern over the United States, and including all of our embassies and consulates abroad. Their international and strategic policies.
I'm almost somewhat against it, almost in principle, almost regardless, even not even counting whether it follows the executive branch or not. This idea of this sort of, I'm a non-interventionist, and just the general principle, even if, Trump were to use it to affect a lot of governments, I generally probably wouldn't even be down with that, but that might be a different take on it. But I wouldn't mind showing, I got this video from Scott Horton, who I really like. He's good on Ukraine and the Middle East and all kinds of things, but he's also pretty good he's got a little 2-minute segment here on Piers Morgan, where he sort of talked about the various colour revolutions, they call them, where they tried to overthrow various governments, I think mainly in Europe, generally as part of the anti-Russia sort of push, which is probably not a good policy to follow.
Well, and I think it's really important. Like, folks, you need to understand, like, any of the things, or at least a vast majority of things that the CIA is doing overseas is going to be under the cover of USAID. And I think, and it's almost, and don't get me wrong, I think there's some value in that. Look, again, we shouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater. There's some things that the CIA does that are legitimate, even in the covert world and the sort of soft power world. that are beneficial and are for the greater good of the United States. And that's what I want. I want initiatives being pushed either overtly or covertly that benefit the United States, that are not political, that aren't just benefiting one party or one politician, and or subverting the politicians that happen to be in power that were elected by the American people. So a lot of these things that you're going to bring up are basically, we can call it USAID, but it's really another 3-letter organization.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm happy to see it get wrapped up a bit. But yeah, I'll just play I think it's about 2.5 minutes. I'll just check I haven't got the speed.
Send it.
Yeah. I had the speed on fast before. Just
for that.
check.
What about the $20 billion for Israeli war crimes?
Omar, my guy, you're...
They were talking about the Gaza-Israel thing, but then they sort of segue to USAID. Yeah. Oops.
blowing it, man. All you have to do is say, yes, absolutely, yes. I agree, and we should all agree about this and about the Pentagon too.
Agree about cutting back on USAID and Pentagon spending, because I guess the sort of pro-Palestinian guy second from the right here, he was just saying, I'm not too worried about USAID, I'm more worried about Pentagon waste. But Scott Horton's like, look, we should oppose both, basically.
Too, man. It's one big empire. And I'm sorry for Pierce and everybody. The crisis and the scandal with USAID is not just pissing away money on these kind of ridiculous things, as you name. This is the major engine of regime change overseas. We get distracted by things like George W. Bush marching the entire 3rd Infantry Division into Iraq and things like that. But starting in late Clinton and through W. Bush and Obama, we've had what are called the color-coded revolutions all over mostly in Eastern Europe and in Russia's near abroad, mostly overthrowing governments that are friendly to the Russians and helping to cause this horrible new Cold War that we're in right now. And they started it in the Balkans in the late 1990s and with, of course, Serbia in the year 2000, Georgia in 2003, Ukraine the first time in 2004. They did it again in 2014. They did the failed Denim Revolution in Belarus and the Tulip Revolution in Kyrgyzstan and the failed Cedar Revolution in Lebanon in 2005 and on like this. And the worst crisis, the worst thing that USAID has ever done by far is 10 years ago, their avowed support for the bin Ladenites in Syria in Barack Obama's dirty war on behalf of the Syrians. And this is where, the Syrian so-called revolution, which was really Al-Qaeda in Iraq, in Syria, the bad guys from the last war. And why? And this is where our conversation comes full circle. Because America, following, as your other guest here said, following Netanyahu's advice and the neoconservatives working for him, lying us into war with Iraq, they empowered Iran and put the Iraqi Shiite supermajority in power in Baghdad. So then they panicked and they launched what the Bush administration called the redirection. That said, now we have to tilt back toward the Sunnis. If we put Iran up 2 pegs, the Shiites up 2 pegs in Baghdad, then we have to take them down a peg in Syria. And that means getting rid of Bashar al-Assad. And as we discussed the last time I was on your show debating Wesley Clark, Pierce, that means, as we see right now, just as happened 2 months ago, finally, Al-Qaeda in Iraq, in Syria, led by Mohammed al-Jolani, has just seized power in Damascus and taken over the country. And it was USAID up to that in their eyeballs the whole time. Why? Because they're making up for the disaster of doing what Netanyahu had recommended the time before that.
Okay.
So yeah, it sort of goes a little bit branched off into other things there, because the general topic was to, branch from the Israel thing, and we sort of tied it all a little bit together there. But yeah, like all these various things in Europe, specifically with USAID, generally it's not a force for good in the world. It's, probably led to a lot of the problems we have with Russia and all that kind of thing. And I'm happy it's getting wrapped up a bit.
Behind USAID is obviously good, and same thing with the Department of State. And there again, you even start. It's hard to delineate between U.S. Department of State, USAID, and even the CIA when we're talking about diplomatic operations overseas, because man, all of those things, there's so much intermingling of funds, of people working across those lines. But yeah, the USAID has been a corrupt organization, a very political organization, and a leftist, fanatical organization for a really long time. And I was shocked when it came out that they were basically going to close USAID. And I think it's funny. It makes sense because it is so obvious once you start looking at what they do, some of their operations, the funding, where they put money. It is one of the most corrupt and one of the most swampy areas of government that we have. And unfortunately, they're one of the most forward-facing when we're talking about, when we're talking about working with our counterparts overseas as well. And that's the real problem with it too.
Yeah, I've just got a little bit of this article. This is from Ron Paul, basically reiterating a similar point. USAID is a key component of the US government's regime change operations worldwide. USAID spends billions of dollars every year propping up NGOs overseas that function as shadow governments, eating away at elected governments that the US interventionists want to overthrow. Behind most US foreign policy disasters overseas, you will see the fingerprints of USAID. From Ukraine to Georgia and far beyond, USAID is meddling in the internal affairs of foreign countries, something that would infuriate Americans if it was happening to us. And he says something down at the bottom here about Elon Musk reposted an article saying that USAID funneled $53 million to support gain-of-function research on coronaviruses in the Wuhan lab. Have you heard this one? I'm not sure if that's
I've heard it.
true.
I don't know how legitimate it is, but I mean, it wouldn't surprise me at all. Again, USAID has been a money laundering scam for a really long time. You talked about the NGOs. If we looked at all the NGOs that USAID funds, and then you do a deeper dive into what those NGOs are actually doing overseas, again, we would be shocked at because that's what they do. That's how they wash their hands of it. You have this NGO that's called, Peace for the World or whatever the NGO is called. But what really it is, they're helping to fund terrorist organizations, or the other big thing that USAID has been deeply involved with is for a long time, funding these NGOs at our southern border, helping illegal immigrants and teaching them what they need to know, and as well as giving them resources to get across the border. So that's been a huge part of this as well. And I think I almost think that was kind of the impetus behind Elon and Trump going after them the way that they are. I think that's how they got on their it's like, man, who is this that are funding all of these illegal immigrants coming across here? How are they getting trained? How are they getting these resources? And next thing you know, you follow the breadcrumbs, it's back to USAID. And then you start looking at the things that USAID does overseas, and it's a whole nother bat of, ball of wax that is just terrible, that Americans would not agree with. I don't care. The average Democrat wouldn't agree with most of the things that they're doing overseas, much less the average American.
Yeah, you see the reaction. It's quite hysterical. You had all those politicians that did the protests. They tried to march in. That Vindman, what's his name? He's the guy. He helped some of the impeachment against Trump to do with the Ukraine call, the perfect call, as Trump said. It was a pretty perfect call, that one. But he was there. He tried to get in. They didn't let him. He was kicking up a big stink. I've got a clip here from MSNBC, and I think Jen Psaki.
This is my favorite person right here.
Yeah. Sorry for the visual, but let's...
But we begin tonight with a full-on crisis in our democracy, as federal workers are literally locked out of their offices while operatives working for a private citizen essentially take over our government. Their tactics include turning off our federal websites, deleting government-funded research that you, the taxpayer, paid for to impose speech codes, bullying news organizations by demanding interview transcripts, implementing an FBI purge, locking federal workers out of their computers, and even turning them away at their offices while giving themselves, without congressional or any other authorization, full access to the personal data of tens of millions of Americans, including Social Security recipients, FBI agents and officials, military and government contractors, and every single employee of the federal government. All of that data in private hands that you did not authorize, even if you voted for Donald Trump. This as Trump installs unqualified minions at the heads of every federal agency, knowing that they wouldn't stop this even if they knew how. At least when he's not threatening multiple trade wars or vowing to launch a new age of American imperialism by colonizing the indigenous people of Greenland and the Panama Canal, all while congressional Democrats issue strongly worded letters, plus holding a press conference today and congressional Republicans sit back and let the federal government they work for collapse all around them, while they occasionally beg Trump for tariff mercy for their states. If this were happening in any other country right now, I promise you, I'd be on the air calling it a coup.
I don't know.
Yeah, that was a bit more broad than I thought. But yeah, they're whinging about everything.
I think maybe we should implement a policy where we don't show any clips with Joy Reid.
Yeah, I should have just put up a trigger warning before.
It is a good litmus test to see what the craziest leftists are actually saying and what they're whining about. And but man, she is so hard to watch and listen to.
Yeah, I don't know. Do you reckon you can take any more from Jen Psaki?
Yeah, I can handle her a little bit better than I could do at least a 4-1 of Jen Psaki to Joy Reid.
I haven't actually seen this one yet, but I imagine she's not happy because she's, she was all there with the Obama, what was it, the State Department spokesperson during a lot of shady USAID stuff.
Yeah.
Where is it? Boom, boom, boom. All righty, let's see what her take is.
It's going to be a good one.
Elected best friend, Elon Musk. His latest target was the United States Agency for International Development. And that agency is the one that not only leads on humanitarian assistance around the world, but also works to combat corruption and foreign aid programs. It's a big part of what they do.
That's hilarious.
I kind of see how that could make Elon Musk a bit uncomfortable. So what do you think he did? You may already know. Well, he removed 2 of the top leaders of the organization who wouldn't do his bidding over the weekend. And then overnight, last night, employees received an email ordering them not to come into the office today. They weren't given a reason or any sort of rationale. They were basically just told not to show up. Many were even blocked from the system and locked out of their email accounts.
Poor things.
We're also seeing something similar happening in the Treasury Department. In the last few days, Elon Musk and his DOGE pals have been granted access to the federal payment system that handles paychecks to federal workers, Social Security checks, tax refunds, and basically incredibly sensitive personal information about anyone who gets those payments. This takeover is also happening across the Office of Personnel Management, where Musk has gained unprecedented access to federal human resources databases that house sensitive personal information about millions of federal employees. And I'm going to talk with the reporter who broke that story today about what else he's learned later in the show. Now, I'm going to just be straight with you about all this. I mean, in the face of all of this and much more that's happened the last 2 weeks, there's not always been the type of clear, consistent, and united response from leading Democrats that I believe, and you probably believe, the moment requires.
I don't really care too much about whether the Democrats are opposing it enough. I think we've seen enough, unless you really want to see the end of that.
No. I mean, that says it all. Anytime that you're cutting any sort of government program or anything like that, millions of people are going to die. People are losing their jobs. They don't have access to their email. I mean, they're clutching their pearls like they always do. And it never, I never get tired of watching it, to be honest with you. It's just a shame that so many people fall for their nonsense.
I guess this is a recent letter that's went out to the USAID people, maybe giving them the boot, I suppose. I haven't actually read through all of it. But this Ian Miles Strong, for whatever it's worth, he's saying that they've all been fired.
Yeah.
Or to pack up their... Anyway, lots of big changes happening. And I'm here for it, as the kids say.
I mean, this is what draining the swamp looks like. And this is what the majority of American people want. And I think we know that we've had... let me tell you something. The Department of State has been off limits to any sort of accountability whatsoever for a really, really long time. And it's really good to see that some people are being held accountable, that that the way they spend our money, that they're having to account for that. That's going to be tough in a lot of different areas. So we'll probably cover the story a little bit more in depth come Monday. Of course, that's a whole nother probably 3 news cycles away. So who knows what's going to come up with that.
I do have one quick clip from Stephen Miller.
Send it.
Americans voted for one man, Donald J. Trump. They didn't vote for a single bureaucrat at USAID. They voted for Donald Trump to make government accountable to the taxpayer, to make government accountable for them. If the Democrats are saying, as they are, that President Trump cannot implement his agenda at USAID, that Donald Trump cannot fire recalcitrant bureaucrats, what they are saying, what Democrats are saying, is they oppose democracy itself. They oppose the idea that the American people can elect a man, in this case, our President Donald Trump, to reform the government according to the will of the people. This is a battle between the will of the people through their President Donald Trump and the will of an unelected federal bureaucracy. So we and President Trump are on the side of democracy.
So there you go. Pretty good stuff. So I'm happy with that. Not as happy about the next topic so much, but yeah, I'm all for the USAID one.
All right, let's segue into the events going into, well, I guess a lot of this came from, I know it kind of was the catalyst for you jumping on this topic, was Trump's recent speech with Netanyahu. So I guess kind of take it from there, Chris, and then we'll see the points where we disagree with. And of course, we'll see where the viewers lie on some of these issues as well.
Yeah. All right, so I'll just play some of the clips. But spoiler alert, the more observant regular fans might notice, used to have a Trump bobblehead here. He's coming down, okay? Not happy this week. Maybe he'll come back up next week, but not happy with this whole let's kick all the Gazans out plan, but we'll go through it. He makes out like it's quite a beautiful plan, you know, that'll make everyone happy, but I don't know, let's see. So this was beforehand, just before, so obviously he met Netanyahu, they had a bit of a sit down, there's a bit of a press gaggle and then a more proper press conference. I've got a few clips of that, but just before he met Netanyahu, he had this other press conference by himself where he sort of, was talking about the upcoming meeting with Netanyahu and what might happen. So just let me share it. One day we'll get big enough, we'll get like full producers and they'll just, you know, line all these things up for us, you know. But that depends on you people in the chat ponying up some dough one day, you know, or just sharing the videos, whatever you got to do.
Just share the videos. That's all it takes.
All right.
In your talks with Prime Minister Netanyahu today, do you intend to press him about how many deaths there have been amongst Palestinians? Are you concerned about that death?
I talk about that too. You know, both sides mean a lot. I talk about that. I talk about the other side. I talk about everything.
What's your main message to him today during your meeting?
Well, I'm here to listen. He's here to see me, and I'm here to listen. So there's not much of a message. At the right time, I'll give him my message.
President, will you continue to press for this idea that Jordan and Egypt take Palestinians from Gaza?
Yeah, I would like to see Jordan. I'd like to see Egypt take some. Look, the Gaza thing has not worked. It's never worked. And I feel very differently about Gaza than a lot of people. I think they should get a good, fresh, beautiful piece of land, and we get some people to put up the money to build it and make it nice and make it habitable and enjoyable and make it a home.
They don't want to leave, though. Palestinians say they don't want to leave.
I don't know how they could want to stay. It's a demolition site. It's a pure demolition site. If we could find the right piece of land or numerous pieces of land and build them some really nice places with plenty of money in the area, that's for sure, I think that would be a lot better than going back to Gaza, which has had just decades and decades of death.
Where would those pieces of land be?
Well, they could be in Jordan, and they could be in Egypt, and they could be in other places. You could have more than two, more than one, but you could have more than two, and you'd have people living in a place that could be very beautiful and safe and nice. Gaza's been a disaster for decades.
Would the U.S. pay for that?
I don't think the UN would pay, but I think there's plenty of people that would in the area. They have a lot of money. They certainly have a lot of money. Some of the countries over there, they'd like to see it. I know that Saudi Arabia wants to see peace. I can see that. And many of the countries there, as far as I'm concerned, they all want peace. I think, maybe I'm wrong on this, but I think Iran would like to see peace too. They've had enough. Don't you think they've had enough?
I might pause it there to make a few comments. Because Jordan and Egypt, they're not keen on this, so they've since responded, as they have this whole time, that they will not facilitate moving the Gazans out of Gaza into Egypt and Jordan. The pro-Israel side will say, well, look at that, that's because they don't want the Palestinians because the Palestinians are so bad and all this kind of stuff. But a part of it is this principle of people not getting kicked out of their homes. And regardless of what you think of the conflict, hopefully you can understand that generally you probably don't want to get moved out of your home against your will. And so Jordan and Egypt, after this proposal that develops more after he speaks to Netanyahu, they've sort of said, like, no, we're not playing along with that. We see this as ethnic cleansing. And this idea that, like, the Gazans would want to leave and be happy somewhere else, it's just not very realistic, I don't think. And he mentioned Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia has said, we will not establish relations with Israel. They said this after all these events. We will not establish relations with Israel until there is the creation of a Palestinian state. So I think he's been a little bit too idealistic. Hopefully it's part of his negotiation tactic. I mean, we'll see more as it goes through, but I just wanted to comment on Egypt and Saudi Arabia.
And all these countries are currently saying that, and until once Trump starts threatening some tariffs or something like that on top of them, or pulling foreign aid, and there's a whole lot of other levers that we can pull that can influence those decisions. So I understand where you're coming from, but at the same time, I think we have a lot more influence on these countries than they would even like to pretend at the initiation of this. So it is going to be interesting to see how this all plays out. But go ahead and play the rest of this, because there's some other comments that we'll get into on that as well.
Leaders of Egypt and Jordan have said bluntly they have no interest in doing this.
Well, they may have said that, but a lot of people said things to me. They said they wouldn't take anybody back in Venezuela, and right now they're flying them right back into Venezuela. And a lot of people, and they're doing the right thing in Venezuela. The Panama Canal is an active discussion right now, and they said things about that. And virtually everything that's been said has been incorrectly stated based on the result.
Would that amount to forcibly displacing, or wouldn't that amount to forcibly displacing those people from Gaza?
I don't think so. I think if they had the opportunity, they'd love it. If they had an alternative to Gaza, they have no alternative right now. I mean, they're there because they have no alternative. What do they have? It is a big pile of rubble right now. I mean, have you seen the pictures of it? Have you been there?
Why?
It's like terrible.
Israeli bombs.
Who can live like that? And very dangerous. There's shooting all over the place. There's bombing all over the place on both sides. Now, I would think if they had an option of moving to either in a large group or various smaller groups and take care of the close to 2 million people, I would think that they would be thrilled to do it. They have no, when you say about the Gaza Strip, they don't have an option.
To be clear, you're saying they'd be
thrilled. It's very dangerous.
They'd be thrilled to leave Gaza.
Oh, I think they'd love to leave Gaza if they had an option. Right now, they don't have an option. What are they going to do? They have to go back to Gaza. But what is Gaza? There's practically not a building standing, and they're very dangerous. Those buildings are shifting, and they're falling down all over the place, and there's gunfire all over. It's going to be that way for a while.
Mr. President, wouldn't it have been made more?
It's going to be that way for a while. They've just signed a ceasefire. And, shouldn't we try and... It's like there's not even any pretense anymore of trying to fulfill that. There's 3 phases. I don't know all the details. They had the first phase where they... Just recently... I don't know if it got too much... I don't think it got too much news coverage, like a week ago. There were a few of these Israeli hostages that were exchanged and these big scenes. Hamas put on a big show about it, a big propaganda show as they released them. And that was the first stage, and that was quite good. They got the hostages back. That's good. And then the further stages, they were supposed to negotiate more and keep a ceasefire going. But it seems like they've abandoned that. And, it's almost like they've condemned those hostages now. I just generally don't like it's not honest. It's one thing to say, look, there's no solution. It's not nice, but we just have to remove all the people from Gaza against their will. But to sort of pretend like, oh, no, this is what they want and they're going to love it over there. And it's just, there's a lot of salesmanship here, which, Trump's good at, but it's,
Well, I mean, the part that he's
being honest about it.
The part that he's right about is that right now it's uninhabitable. So regardless.
For the most part.
Yeah, I mean, it is going to be for probably the next decade. So whether we're talking about a permanent solution or a temporary solution, the fact of the matter is there's going to be, I don't even know how many people are in Gaza, but I mean, there's going to be a huge number of people displaced, just because it's going to happen. I don't know, so like none of these solutions, and you and I talked about this prior to. The fact is that there's two problems. Number one is that none of these solutions are going to be palatable by a majority of anyone. Doesn't mean it's not the best or the best solution. The other part of this is that this is always for some reason, Israel is always an American problem, or at least we seem to get involved with it, or are expected to get involved with it. And you know what? This is it. This is a Middle East problem that the countries in the Middle East need to kind of, I don't know, do some things to help with the situation, because there is what we have going on there is not sustainable. I mean, it's not. It hasn't worked. It's like when the Palestinians, I don't believe the Palestinians, quite frankly, have ever wanted peace. I think there's just so much anti-Semitism, and maybe some of that is warranted due to the way that Israel has treated the Palestinians. But there is so much anti-Semitism that is taught and bred within the Palestinian community at the lowest level, much less when we get into Hamas and some of these other terrorist organizations that are funded by Iran over there. And that's the other part of that, is essentially it's, Palestine, Gaza, the West Bank, they're all used by Iran to basically harass their major enemy, and that is, Israel. So it's just not a good situation. We can go back and we could, we talked about the fact that you can go back in time and we can relitigate whether or not, the establishment of Israel was good, bad, or indifferent. But the fact is, it is what it is. And the other part of this is I don't think there's not a path for peace, and I don't know that there ever has been. Neither side wants peace. Both sides want the destruction of the other. I think that is true, right or wrong.
Yeah.
But
the solution shouldn't be let's side on one side that wants to destroy the other and give them what they want and get them to basically destroy the other side, which is sort of what they're doing, but which doesn't sound very nice, which is why he dresses it up as if, oh, no, they would want to leave. And,
I think October 7th sealed their fate. That's how I feel about it. Like, we understand that there's probably a 50-1 versus the might of the Israeli military versus what the Palestinians and Hezbollah and all these other folks can even do, and really even Iran. They decided to do what they did, and they knew the reaction. And I think they miscalculated. They thought there was going to be a reaction by Israel and then the international community, which they kind of had to come in and try to quell things. And they were going to use that as a way to make Israel look even worse. And to some people, and maybe to you and many other people out there that are more, that are a little bit more on the side of Palestine. To me, I'm on Team Israel at the end of the day. And I'm not saying that everything they do is right. And a lot of what they do is wrong. But this is what war looks like. And this is what war has always looked like outside of modern warfare, where we, play this diplomatic war. But you know what? When you invade a country, you rape and kill people, you take hostages, you should expect nothing less than utter destruction. And that's just, to me, it's sad, because there's going to be a lot of innocent people that are caught up in it, but that is war. And I know that war of what it really is unpalatable to most people today in a modern society that have grown up and that have all the luxuries and amenities that they now, enjoy. But the fact of the matter is, man, I don't know what the rest of the world expected after October 7th. And especially the way the Hamas fights, like, they make it impossible not to have catastrophic casualties on civilians. They do. Is Israel as strategic and precise with their airstrikes as they probably should be? Probably not. But it's again, when you're dropping bombs, bad things happen. And I don't know what else to say. That's kind of where I stand on most of this.
Yeah, look, I understand that perspective. To me, it's just, I don't know the idea of collectively punishing 2 million people. Half of them are like, more than half of them are women and children, I think, because of October 7th. Especially considering, we say that, this is war and these things happen. Look, it almost pains me to kind of say, but like even with October 7th, these things come from an ongoing occupation where people are just demoralized and bombed every couple of years. And it's like these sort of attacks into Israel are sort of part of it. And that's why they have such a secure border. That's why they've got the Iron Dome. They're sort of dealing with the consequences of an occupation. And especially when you have the idea that the fact that Israel sort of propped up Hamas in the first place, in a way, because they saw them as more radical. Oh, they are more radical than the other groups. And therefore, because basically, in my opinion, Israel, both sides don't want peace. Just like you can say it on the Palestinian side, Israel have never really wanted a two-state solution. But, they sort of play the game where this is just my reading of it. They play the game where they make out, we really want a Palestinian state. It's just, it's just they don't want it or we can't get it done. They never want a Palestinian state. And October 7th was just the perfect pretext because, obviously there should be a response. And the response would be related to getting hostages and targeting Hamas. But that's not what they're doing. This is the perfect pretext. And I wouldn't be surprised if, look, I'm not sure, but I think the defences on October 7 are very suspicious. Okay, I think there was one near the music festival. I saw a report from Haaretz, and fair enough, this is a lefty Israeli paper.
Sure.
But they basically said it was like 10 hours or... I have to double check it. It's hard to believe. But it was many, many hours after Hamas started killing people. They were running amok. And some places it took many, many hours for Israel to even get there to stop them. Yeah. To me, October 7, as horrible as it was for Israel and the innocent beings that were killed, it was the perfect gift to Netanyahu and his ilk to carry out the plan that they've always had to kick every single Gazan out of there. And that's exactly what they did. And as they were bombing people, they would say, like you mentioned, Hamas, they sort of fight behind civilians, and that's why, you have so much civilian death. Look, there's some truth to that. But that's not what they're doing. To me, they're systematically, deliberately flattening the entire region, regardless of Hamas or where they are. And they'll just say, we're just targeting Hamas. But really, the plan was flatten it so it's completely unlivable. And then what do we have now? Trump comes in and says, because it's completely flattened, because it's completely unlivable, they have to all get kicked out. And Israel gets exactly what they've wanted this entire time. And I just don't think the deaths of like 1,000 people justifies all of this, the death of 50,000 plus people that had nothing to do with it. Mostly people that weren't even alive when Hamas was voted in like a decade or two ago, whenever it was.
Yeah, but here's the thing. I don't do we expect war to be fair? No. That's not how war works. If you have a smaller force that is attacking, and going back through all this thing, it's not a matter of hey, it's 50,000 to 1 or whatever the freaking numbers are. I think the numbers are estimated somewhere around 60,000 deaths. And again, a lot of those are going to be women and children. Another percentage of those are going to be people that aren't involved directly. And then you compare that to, I don't know what it is, like 1,500 people that were killed or whatever it was in Israel. But that's not like we don't look at a ratio of like, you don't say, okay, now send us 1,500 over here and let us kill them, or we won't invade. The fact is once that you invade it into and again, the problem with this is like the way that we look at warfare for the last, 2 or 3 decades, the way that we've been conducting war, which doesn't end wars, by the way. We can't expect war to be fair. So there's that. And when they decided to attack on October 7th, they should have known what was coming. And to some extent, it could be a lot worse. And you're probably right. You're probably right that Netanyahu and the more far right or more militaristic side of the Israeli government, and even many of the people of the Israeli government, looked at this as an opportunity to do what they wanted to do. But I will go back to this. Here's one thing that I do believe. I believe that if there had been a 5 to 10 year period where rockets or suicide bombs or something like that hadn't come out of Gaza, like, there would be legitimate discussions for peace. But that's never has what happened. They have continued to conduct terrorist attacks on Israel, like, throughout the years. My entire life, all I've heard about is bombings on buses, rockets going into Israel. That's why we spent the money that we spent providing the Iron Dome in Israel. Like, we can't pretend that doesn't exist. There would be no way that if we had like a border state with Canada or Mexico where we're suddenly getting rockets once every 30 days or something like that, that we wouldn't go in and just lay waste to that place, as it should be. So I don't think that it's a fair, I don't think that it's an equal comparison between the two, right? I don't. I think one has continued to target civilians, men, women, and children, just like they did on October 7th. And we can say, let's say the conspiracies are because you're kind of dipping your toe in it a little bit. So let's just address it. Let's say the conspiracy theories are correct, that Netanyahu allowed October 7th to happen. It was planned to let it happen. It was a let it happen operation, LHOP. Okay. So why does that make Netanyahu the bad guy? When you're like, hey, you know what? Let's see, and it's not right. I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying, because if you're saying, hey, you know what? I'm going to bring down. I'm going to give them a chance. If they want to come in and show their true colors, let's let that happen, and they did. Then that just proved Netanyahu's point. Like, I don't know. It's like, hey, you know what? I think my neighbor's a dirtbag. I want to leave my garage door open, put a camera in there, and see if this son of a bitch comes in here and tries to steal my dirt bike or whatever other contraption I might have in there. And then it happens. Like, all you did was prove my point.
Yeah, but then he's responsible for letting these people die. If the conspiracy is true.
But I mean, the point is
if he chose not to stop them, if he's like, no, let Hamas kill our people.
I think there's been some explanations. I don't know if they're good. I can't say for sure that's.
I don't think they're good. No. I mean, that's one of the most secure borders. I mean, how long is it? A couple of kilometers long. It's so tiny. It's so highly surveilled. There was a lot of intelligence before. I don't have any proof of anything. It's just
were they shooting?
Yeah, look, I'll be the Cullen for the day or whatever. But look, there is more evidence to back this one up than.
I actually agree with you on that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's not a high bar, but yeah, I mean, yeah, maybe they were just so incompetent, despite all their funding and all their. And look, this isn't passing. Look, don't take any of this as me passing the blame away from Hamas. Hamas came in and killed all these people, and they're 100% responsible for that. But if Israel was like, look, this is sort of exactly what we want. Oh, and before, when you sort of said if it wasn't for Hamas sort of sending these rockets in over the years, there would be a legitimate push for peace. I just strongly disagree with that. That's why Hamas is there in the first place. In my opinion, Israel basically put Hamas there for the reason that there will be conflict and there will be violence, just so they could avoid having to give a Palestinian state, because they don't agree with the idea of a Palestinian state. Even like some people in the comments here, like, there is no such thing. That's Israel land from given to them by God, or that they used to have thousands of years ago. They don't see it as Palestinian land. They don't want to give them a Palestinian state. They will do whatever they can to stop that from happening. And as you sort of said, why don't we just let Hamas come in and show their colours? It's the same thing. Why don't we put Hamas in power and let the world see that we can't deal with them? And, so I think it's just all these points show that they don't want peace at all. And they're getting exactly what they wanted right now, which is kicking everyone out of Gaza. Yeah, so they're not pinpointing...
The problem is, I don't think the average Palestinian. I think the average Palestinian is going to be much more radical than I think we would give them credit for, and I think they want a organization like Hamas in place. So, I mean, we can separate Hamas from the average Palestinian, but I think it would be wrong to do so. I mean, again, these people, everybody over there, and let's just call it like it is the vast majority of Muslims worldwide have been indoctrinated to hate Jews more than anything, and even far worse, or even much more at a much more severe degree, Palestinians. And again, I'm not saying that some of their hatred, contempt, and anger and all these things don't have a basis in reality and don't have reason for it. But
it wouldn't even need to be taught, would it? They just lose family members.
Yeah. But how does the average Israeli feel too? Because there's lots of people over there have been they lost family to bombings and rockets and live in constant fear as well, when there have been many times where Israel's over here minding their own damn business, and now we're just constantly getting rocket attacks and things like that.
I'm not sure when they were minding their own business. I don't think that's ever been. I've never witnessed that in the last. They've always occupied.
But they're not using force. We'll just say that, where they're not actively using some sort of force, where they're not going through and patrolling. There's definitely been times like that. And the problem is, and I've seen this a lot in the Middle East, and I think this is one of the biggest misunderstandings that Americans have of Middle Eastern cultures, is kindness is taken as weakness. And that's one of the biggest things that we didn't understand in the war of Iraq and Afghanistan and GWAT in general. Like, these people, if you show them kindness, they don't respect you, and they only respect. And it's just, I think the way that we've, the Middle East is a certain area that has had a culture and has been ruled in such a way for so many years that if you don't show brutality, there's a certain level of, you just never gain their respect. And that's one of the things. They look at it as weakness. I really do believe that, and that's been my experience time and time again. I know how we have dealt with even our FID partners overseas, our partners that we were working with. I saw, for instance, I'll give you just a kind of a quick example of this. There were regular Iraqi military, like colonels and even some generals and stuff like that we as a special operations detachment would be working with, and they would have their same FID partners on the conventional forces. And you have these American colonels walk into this Iraqi colonel's office and be like, "Oh, Sadie, this," and they would treat them like a superior. The Americans would treat this colonel, who in my mind, if you're a general in the Iraqi army, as far as I'm concerned, you're the equivalent of a private in the United States Army. That's how I look at you. And me, as a E7, E6 at the time, I would go in there like I owned the place, and I commanded respect, and I would get so much out of it. And I had total respect. These guys would ask me to come over, smoke cigars with them. We had a great working relationship. And the way that they treated the Americans, who were, again, freaking staff officers, like, they thought they were a joke. But that is the way it is in the Middle East. And I think a lot of people just don't understand that. And I know that's not going to apply across the board, but generally speaking, I believe that's the truth. And I've spent a lot of time over there. I used to have pretty much a timeshare in Iraq and Afghanistan. So they look at kindness as weakness, and I just don't see a good solution. And there's not going to be, I don't know. Like, I don't know, but I do know that we can't expect Israel to sit by after October 7th. So whether that was, a bait operation or not, it happened, and Israelis died. They were kidnapped.
Had to respond.
They had to respond, and we should expect, like, let me tell you something. You come and you, if you're my neighbor, you come kill one of my kids and my dog or whatever else. Like, I'm going to your house and nobody's walking out of there. Like, that is the response that you should expect.
But I hate to be this guy, but wouldn't Hamas wouldn't that be their pitch as well? Israel, come over here, they've killed your family, join us, and we're going to go mess them up?
Maybe, but here's the other freaking part of that equation is, like, they know they can't win. So their only option is to sue for peace, and they've never done that. They've never pursued peace. And you might say that Israel hasn't either, but Israel holds all the cards in that region, and that is a fact. So either you go along and you get along, or you play this insurgency game, this terrorist game that you're playing, and then everything around you ends up dead and in rubble. That's their options.
Yeah, I just don't think Israel have ever been kind to Palestinians, and I don't.
I'll admit that. I don't think they have.
Yeah, this idea of taking kindness as weakness, I don't think that's really been there from Israel. And if anything, the bombing them would not make them respect them; it would make them hate them. And that's what I was just going to show. This little article. So this just came out. Look, I hate Blinken. Okay, it's like I don't trust him at all. But he just came out saying basically Hamas has recruited. They're back to their original numbers. See, the pretext, the response to October 7 is we have to destroy Hamas, we have to get the hostages back. That's a lie. This whole time, in my opinion, that's not what they're doing. The goal was flatten the place, kick them all out. And the rest is just bullcrap. Because unless they're just completely failing at everything. They're not doing too well with the bombing to get the hostages. I think they even killed some of the hostages.
Well, you're not going to... Yeah, I mean, I'm
not going to take his word.
Blinken's a freaking liar no matter what, so anything he said...
Yeah, as I said, I don't trust him at all. But like, this makes complete sense. Like, you bomb people, you're going to radicalize them. The orphans, the family members, they've killed 60,000 people. At least a few of them, their family members are going to join Hamas. And I think this is completely predictable. And you saw them at the hostage sharing just recently, and they're just there in massive numbers. Like, Israel has been bombing these people for like 16 months to destroy them with all their weaponry, and Gaza's trapped in this small little thing. And after all this time and all this death, Hamas are still standing strong. And
well, this goes back to this. Well, what you're talking about is a product of modern warfare. The reason that Rome and even the United States and going back to whether we're talking about the Civil War, whether we're talking about the Revolutionary War, World War I, World War II, prior to World War II, like World War II, and like we understood what warfare was. You go out and you kill people till there is no one left wanting to fight. You choke the will to fight out of them. And the problem that we have with modern warfare is we end up exactly what you're talking about. We kill just enough people to stop the initial onslaught. And then what it does, and then we have these little breaks, and then what it does, it gives people like, oh, well, maybe there's still a chance. But that's the problem with modern warfare, is it's kinder, gentler, drags it out, and end up being a lot more people killed than it needs to be ultimately. I mean, you look at, one of the things I don't think people understand, like, World War II Japan was the most fanatical, craziest, like, we look at Islamist jihadists as fanatical and willing to die. They're nothing compared to Japan. But guess what? After we dropped 2 atomic bombs, and you can litigate whether that was the right answer or not. Like, they were like, holy shit. All right. We're done. Just joking. JK. And now, they're one of the most productive societies, peaceful societies on the face of the planet. Like, you don't get more passive than the Japanese anymore, when they were one of the most warrior ethnic countries, people to ever exist.
Yeah, I'm going to disagree on that one. That sounds like just US propaganda to me to justify dropping all the nuclear bombs. Because I'm pretty sure, I have to read more into it, but Japan, they were trying to find a way to surrender that would somehow save face. And then just before the bombs coming in, the Soviets had just said, we will invade. We will invade Japan.
I think that's a revision of history right there. I really do. They were going to fight to the last person. I don't doubt that maybe there were some people within the Japanese government that wanted to hold on to power and wanted to do this or that may have proposed those things. But the Japanese people, I mean, we're talking about a country where they had like soldiers that like 27 years later on an abandoned island was still thought the war was going on and still ready to kill Americans. I mean, that's the level of dedication that the Japanese had, that like, so I don't doubt that that's partially correct, but I do think that's some revisionist history to some extent.
But even the firebombing of Tokyo, it wasn't that, the atomic bomb, obviously it's worse in a lot of ways, but in terms of deaths, it wasn't what's the word? order of magnitude worse. It wasn't like, oh, the firebombing of Tokyo completely flattening this city and that city and that city. That didn't do anything, but it was just, this bomb that did a little bit more damage, well, maybe quite a bit more damage, but not heaps more damage, that changed everything. It's like they were surrounded, the Soviets were about to come in. I don't think it was necessary at all to
I think it was the cherry on top. I think that you're right. I think most of Japan, it was the exact, what it ended up being at the time when those atomic bombs happened after Japan was severely depleted, pretty much knew that they were losing, all those things. And look, there's definitely a part of this that I do think is immoral, in that I do believe the United States wanted to test these devices and use that as a justification to do so in a real world situation. So there is that portion of that. And we can go back and we can, armchair quarterback the World War II if we want. And I put this up earlier. I know some people are saying, you brought it up, kind of talking about, talking about the ancient history of Israel, and Chris and I talked about that. You can go back, whether you want to go back to like pre-1948 or you want to go back 2,000 plus years. I mean, we can relitigate all those things, and we can look at this. And I'll tell you, I do look at this from a religious. There's definitely a religious portion of this that affects my. Look, I'm going to support Israel because I think that's the Christian thing to do. But I also want to distinguish, I think it needs to distinguish between Israel and the Jewish people, because we're talking about a government versus a people, and we can get a little bit weird in that. But my point is that we can talk about what should have been, whether you think that it is manifest destiny or God's intention that Israel exists, or that it was immoral for Israel to become a nation and basically displace people, because that definitely happened. But none of that's going to change the facts on the ground now. What we have is what we have, and I think we need to look at it from that perspective than what if scenario it from the past. I just don't think that does any real, doesn't add any value or is not productive, to say the least.
Well, just before we come back to the future, I just did a quick little Google search or whatever, okay? Like, for whatever this is worth, according to historical evidence, Japan was likely nearing surrender before the atomic bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And it mentioned Soviet entry into the war. And they were trying to save face. If they could have just left the emperor there and they could have completely surrendered. There were many ways around it. To say that the only way to end that war was with 2 nuclear bombs is a lack of the imagination. And because someone said I got to read instead of, getting info from videos or whatever. I do read a bit, and there is quite a bit of debate over this in literature. It's not as clear cut. So anyway, I just had to.
It's not as clear cut. And again, I've read both sides of that. I've heard that there was factions, including the emperor himself, was wanting to surrender, and then he had other generals, things like that didn't want to surrender. So it wasn't like, the fact is they didn't surrender. And and the fact is, if they were just wanting to save face in a surrender in a way that they thought was acceptable, well, that's not how war works. And guess what? If you want to drag your feet to save face, you get nuclear bombs dropped on you. And I'm not saying that to justify the dropping of the nuclear bombs in Nagasaki and Hiroshima, but I'm just saying that's their mistake. Like, you effed up by saying, oh, well, I do kind of want to surrender now, but I'm only going to do it if, I can keep my pride intact. F you, dude. That's not how war works. That means what you're willing to do is to risk and to allow tens of thousands of people to die while you're sitting there trying to make a decision to save your pride. That's not how things work. And
isn't that kind of how war works? I mean, generally either side will fight until they realize that they can't, and then they surrender. They don't just surrender at the beginning.
Well, my point is,
surrounded.
You don't get to say, well, guys, I was about to surrender before you dropped the bombs. Like, if you'd have given me 2 more days, like, that's not a freaking viable answer. And to your point, what if we didn't drop bombs and we just freaking firebombed it twice as hard? Like, it probably end up killing the same amount of people or more, even, like as you stated. But the fact is,
but what if they did surrender in 2 days or whatever? Like, they didn't drop the bomb, but You know, as I said, the Soviets were about to invade, and that was probably another part of it. America didn't want the Soviets to take over Japan like they took over most of Europe.
I don't doubt that there's an element of that too, because then we have a Soviet presence in Japan. We'd probably still be fighting the Soviets and still in the middle of the Cold War because they'd have additional resources and everything else going on over there. So, I mean,
and it was also probably they want to drop the bomb just to show Russia what they could do. It's not like, oh, we just want to end the war and we're just good old humanitarian America just wants to end the war and save the day and spread peace. I mean, you know,
I think back then we had generals that understood what war was, and that was war as hell, and people are going to die, and you continue to kill the bad guys or your enemy. You know, bad is relative. You continue to kill your enemy until they don't want to fight anymore, and that's it. I mean, that's as simple as it gets. We don't like, and the problem, the way that we conduct war now, it's like, okay, all right, look what we can do. Boom, 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 boom. We kill a couple of these guys, and we come back like, you ready to quit? All right, we're going to give you about 15 days to kind of decide whether or not you want to quit. Next thing you know, we lose more American lives. IEDs are put in place all over the place. They're retaliating on us because we give them a chance to retaliate. Like back then, they didn't give chances to retaliate because they understood the consequences were too dire and that more people were going to get killed. We're trying to fight war on a humanitarian, in some sort of humanitarian way. And I'm not saying like, you know, we just go all out and VX gas everybody or anything else. There should be some agreed upon structure there. But at the same time, we need to understand that war is ugly. And again, this goes back to you invade the country, you kill 1,400 Israelis, you rape people, you murder kids, you drag people back across the border and have them as hostages. I mean, it's from an American standpoint. The moment they took American hostages, if I was president, I would have already leveled the place. Like, hey, I'm standing here on the border of Israel with like the entire fleet of tanks, personnel, jets ready to go. If my Americans aren't back by noon today, I'm leveling freaking Palestine. You guys can whine and cry about how unhumanitarian I am and the United States are, but you took American hostages. That should have been our response. And guess what? When that is your response and you can predict that type of response, people quit taking hostages and doing stupid shit because you know it's effing around and finding out. I mean, that's a really good policy, and that is you know peace through strength. We don't do that anymore. Like the fact that we just sat around and waited for Hamas to give back American hostages, I find deplorable. It's so cowardly of the Biden administration. And if the Trump administration had been running it and they ran it the same way, I would have said the exact same thing. We should have had every asset sent over there and just ready to freaking mowed everything down. Because the moment you take American hostages, it's a whole different ballgame as far as I'm concerned. And it was the same under Jimmy Carter. Like Iran would have never taken hostages under President Reagan. I mean, all we've done is project weakness. And that is why October 7th happened in the first place. That's why we had the incursion into freaking Ukraine to begin with. A lot to do with the way that the Biden administration pulled out of Afghanistan. And all these things are because of weakness on the part of America.
Yeah, but like with the hostages, there was... So the way they've got the hostages back, pretty much all of them, are by doing deals with Hamas, not by bombing them. They don't bomb them and hope that the bombs don't hit the hostages. Pretty much all the hostages have come through negotiations, which involve an unfair, disproportionate thing where Israel will release, you know, scores of hostages, prisoners for every one hostage. But this was on the table from day one. And if the best way for America to get back those hostages would be say to Israel, make the deal, get the hostages back. Don't bomb them and kill them. And Israel have killed some hostages accidentally when they moved in.
Do you not agree with the idea that we don't? Do you agree with the premise that negotiating with terrorists is the wrong answer? Because all it does is create more terrorist opportunities and more hostages taken.
Well, so no, because the hostages have been released through negotiating with terrorists. If we don't do this, then we wouldn't have any of the hostages back. Well, the only way they've come back is through negotiations with terrorists.
Well, they did. They took the hostages because they knew there was going to be negotiations, and it's happened before. But if we'd have stayed with the idea, like, hey, man, we don't negotiate with terrorists. It's really shitty if you're a hostage at the time, but it definitely prevents hostages from being taken in the future. It prevents those things, and I think that is the correct policy. And I think most people, innately agree. But when you allow emotions and sympathies and empathy to get in the way of just solid, objective decision making, like, hey, it's really sad that these hostages have been taken, but if we negotiate with them, not only this terrorist organization, but 1,000 other terrorist organizations around the world that have access to Americans are now going to understand that we will negotiate, and we will give up what they want if they take our people. So now what we've done is we put a price on every American's head overseas, and that's a really bad policy.
Yeah, that's a good point as well. But then that sort of reminds me of the so-called, you heard of the Hannibal Directive, which is debated whether it's in use or not. But it's the idea by the Israeli military to prevent this. They possibly even would rather shoot the hostages than let Hamas take them back into Gaza. Because say Hamas is going back with a hostage back over the thing, this theory, which some say was used on October 7, but it's hard to prove these kind of things or whatever, that Israel would actually shoot and kill these hostages so Hamas wouldn't have this bargaining chip, so there wouldn't be any negotiation with terrorists. So I'm just wondering if the idea with what you're saying about let's not negotiate with terrorists because it creates this precedent, what do you think about the idea of actually not going a step further, and if Hamas are trying to do this, just take out the hostages with them so they can't even do it? Because essentially that's what they're doing by not negotiating and bombing them. It's only an extra step to just shoot the hostages as well.
Well, I think that's the implication of that policy to begin with. Like, unfortunately, our hostages are probably going to die. And we're probably going to be complicit in killing them. I mean, the fact is like the only option when you have that policy, whoever took the hostages, their only option is to give them up immediately, or they know that either they're going to die or the hostages are going to die with them. But regardless, they're not going to get what they want. And that's why kidnappings are and hostage taking is perpetuated. I mean, that's how we're going to see, maybe not under Trump, but let me tell you something, mark my words, the next time we have another weak ass Democrat president and administration that's projecting weakness all over the world, we're going to see more of these types of things. And we do it's been proven over time, whether you're looking at the Carter administration, what happened under Biden, going back even under Clinton, there's been a lot of, almost every single time, if you have a weak president in the United States, a lot of bad things happen abroad because they're afraid to use force. And if that stick isn't there, and all it is a bushel of carrots, like, it's game on for the bad guys worldwide.
Yeah, but I just see, look, we don't trust Blinken or whatever, but I am quite open to the fact that Hamas have completely recruited their numbers back, and not only are Hamas back where they were, ready to keep doing what they did before, you probably have more of the Arab countries that are getting more and more sympathetic to them, because Israel's trying to make some sort of peace with Saudi Arabia and these kind of countries. That's just not sort of happening now, and you have more extremists.
Yeah, I think they were sympathetic. Well, they're look.
Yeah, they always were.
Everybody around Israel is the natural enemy of Israel, because again, what we're talking about is a indoctrination generationally going back to the Middle Ages and beyond, that Israel Jews are the enemy, and that is, you're not going to change that. So yeah, Saudi Arabia, everybody.
There's a bit of that, but I think more of it is the historical events. They just look, they did this, they did that, they did the other. Yeah. And yeah, they sort of go hand in hand. Maybe it's a chicken and the egg thing. Israel does thing, and then they'll brainwash their kids that look at Israel. They bomb us, they kill us, they're horrible people. We got to fight them. They are the enemy. But that Israel sort of plays into that. They just, with what they've done, completely flatten this area of, almost completely flatten the area of 2 million people. So much that they will have to leave now.
What do you think would have been October 7th happened? Chris is in charge of Israel. What would you have done? What do you think is the right answer?
This question does tripped me up a little bit. It's a very good question, and
What kind of question?
look, they had to respond. Look, I'm not completely opposed to. Look, I understand. Yeah, a military response to actually sort of target Hamas. I am at a disadvantage where people say, "What do you know about war? What do you know about military operations?" And the answer is really not much.
Like, what do you think?
I know, not you in general.
What's a proportional response? What if you were the prime minister of Israel right now? What would your left and right limits be for the response to October 7th?
Probably doing what they say they are doing. I don't believe when they say they're just targeting Hamas to get the hostages back. I agree with that in principle, and they should do that. But I don't think they are doing that. I think they're just flattening the whole area and saying, no, we're just trying to target Hamas. They have all the material, they have a lot of intelligence, they have all kind of crazy AI programs where they know where people are and all this kind of stuff. They would be able to target Hamas more efficiently. And yeah, I'm open to the negotiations, even though I understand what the precedent, the bad precedent that set is. But look, I'm not opposed to bombing Hamas, trying to get hostages back and trying to keep them out of power. But basically, Israel's sort of saying they're doing that, but really they're just like, let's ethnically cleanse the area. Let's just bomb it and kick them out to Egypt and Jordan or Europe. They've sort of said right from the very start, they want the rest of the world to take all the Palestinian refugees because we're kicking them out, we don't want them here. I don't think that's fair. I don't think the entire population of Gaza should be punished for that. I think the situation is much more complex than just, not that I'm saying you're saying this, but, innocent old Israel just sitting there and then they get attacked out of the blue.
I don't think Israel's innocent at all.
Yeah, it's a complex thing, and I don't think the solution. Israel has a lot to answer for. So obviously, there's a lot of blame to go around on both sides, and it does not seem fair to me in my heart and my morals that Israel should win by ethnically cleansing this area. It just doesn't sit with me morally or ethically. It's like that's not just.
Well, I mean, every major government has a lot to answer for, right? I mean, Israel. I mean, we could relitigate all the problems that America has done, right, wrong, or indifferent. I mean, we definitely have prosecuted the global war on terrorism completely wrong in so many steps that have cost Americans lives. We could talk about the corruption that we have within our own politicians. We can talk about all different problems. And, Israel has its own problems too when it comes to dealing with you're right. So the higher the complexity of the issues, the more things that a government, especially a government, and people on the ground are going to get wrong. So you have a very complex situation there where, Israelis rightly feel like their lives are constantly threatened. There's an emotional reaction to a lot of this without a doubt. And, you might see, and I do think, you're talking about, moving all the Palestinians out of Gaza into these other countries, and you're framing it as ethnic cleansing, and that's probably not a completely wrong description. Yeah. I'm not even saying
it is a loaded term, but
it's an extremely loaded term because the other one that comes along with that usually is genocide. I don't think
and I don't use that. Yeah.
If your goal is to push your enemies into a different location, I don't know that that's necessarily ethnic cleansing. I don't even know that it's I don't even know if it's an incorrect tactic, right, and strategy.
But what if Hamas did it to Israel? What if they kicked all the Israelis out of Israel?
Well,
that would be called ethnic cleansing for sure, right? Even if they use the justification, well, hey, you came into our country, you killed us. I know people say this because of October 7, but there were previous conflicts where there were the most flimsiest pretexts. I think in 2008.
Oh, sure.
Where they killed 2,000 people. It seems like nothing now. But I can't even remember what it was in response to. It was something so trivial. And like if Hamas would say, look, in response to that, we're going to move into Israel and you get kicked out. And that's what you get because that's what happens when you invade and you kill a bunch of people. And might is right. And, like Israel's just lucky that it has the backing of America. At
the end of the day, might is right. Like, honestly, the strongest among you are going to end up writing history. And, I think, look, we could say, hey, if we kick the Palestinians or we displace the Palestinians or a majority of them into these other countries. You know, I don't even know that ultimately isn't the best solution. I'm not saying it's fair, it's right, it's moral. I don't know that you can even frame some of these, you know, real solutions in those terms. I mean, ultimately, it's like, what do you have to do to end the violence? And whatever that is.
You could just as easily kick Israel out into America or whatever, but people say that's not fair, they don't deserve it. But it all depends where you sit on the
who's going to
conflict.
I mean,
nobody. But maybe America, if America got hands off, maybe Iran, maybe Hezbollah, maybe whoever.
You know, one thing that I think we definitely agree on is the fact that I don't like the idea that we give so much money to Israel. I do think that you know, we are a completely bankrupt country and we shouldn't be funding Israel. And I've said, you know, one of the things I think that should just be a good principle to live by is, guess what? If you're a country that can't exist without the help of the American taxpayer, then you don't get to exist. Like, I'm throwing you to the wolves. So that I do agree with.
I think we should hone in on this. This is agreement. Like, I think America should essentially stay out of it.
It's not fun.
Well, look, you know, it looks better for you. Well, maybe not in this crowd. I think I'm fighting an away team battle here or whatever. But generally, you know, agreeing with me is a good look, I think, for most people. You know, this obviously isn't going to work here at this crowd or whatever. But no, I think, look, we have all these little disagreements about all that. But it's like, look, it's a mess. We can agree on that. America should stay out of that mess. And look, I think America's responsible by being so one-sidedly pro-Israel. Like, they talk about trying the same thing over and over, supporting Israel 100%, giving them all the weapons, siding with them. 99%. You know,
the Obama administration and the Biden administration have not exactly been super forceful behind Israel. As a matter of fact, they've come out and I think they've undermined our. Look, we have. I don't even know if we have anything like an actual treaty. I don't know what legal documents other than like handshakes and smiles that we have behind supporting Israel. But you know,
I don't think there's anything formal. I don't think.
I don't think so either. I mean, we do consider Israel an ally, and you know, once you step into that, unless they do something just so egregious, they're just so cut and dry. Like they just, you know, out of the blue nuke Palestine, we'd probably pull back a little bit. But at the end of the day, we have agreed to become a ally of Israel, and you know, we've picked the side, and I think you gotta kind of follow through with that, whether you know thick or thin, or even if things get a little mucky, because the reality is, like, you know, America has definitely done some misadventures abroad from its inception, and we've relied on our allies, whether they completely agreed with whatever, you know, that those initiatives were. You know, that's how you have some stability in the world. And I do think that ultimately, strategically, it just makes more sense to support Israel and to have them in our side in the Middle East. It also made a lot of sense strategically to make sure that we have, you know, Bagram Air Base and these other places that we spent billions, if not trillions of dollars in Iraq and Afghanistan, and Afghanistan specifically, that we pulled out of. But point being, I mean, they are our ally, and if we just dump our allies anytime that we don't do something that, you know, they don't do something that we like. But I do agree, we shouldn't be sending them nearly as much money as we do. And I don't know what else to say other than that.
Yeah, I really don't think they're a good ally for America at all, really. I wouldn't mind playing this clip because Trump, I think I mentioned this to you when we were talking before, Trump posted a clip from Jeffrey Sachs, who I really like. He's very good on all kinds of things. I'd recommend people check out Jeffrey Sachs. We're going to show a little bit of him now because Trump posted him on his Trump Truth Social here. What was this? Okay, stay now. Okay, about a month ago. This is very critical of Israel and Netanyahu in particular, basically dragging America into those Middle East wars for Israel's benefit, not America's benefit, which is quite a controversial take. I was quite surprised that Trump posted this. So I'd like to sort of post this because, you know, this is a rough Yeah, it's a rough sort of position for me to have to take. So let me call in the cavalry for Jeffrey Sachs to sort of back me up a little bit on, Israel's
war in Syria.
position.
And you may actually hear from the war in Syria, and you may actually hear from grown-up reporters who are lying through their teeth or ignorant beyond imagining that, oh, the war in Syria, yes, Russia intervened in Syria. Well, do you know that that Obama tasked the CIA to overthrow the Syrian government starting 4 years before Russia intervened? What kind of nonsense is that? And how many times did the New York Times report on Operation Timber Sycamore, which was the presidential order to the CIA to overthrow Bashar al-Assad? 3 times in 10 years. This is not democracy. This is a game. And it's a game of narrative.
He brings it to
Why did the
Israel.
U.S. invade Iraq in 2003? Well, first of all, it was completely phony pretenses. It wasn't, oh, we were so wrong, they didn't have weapons of mass destruction. They actually did focus groups in the fall of 2002 to find out what would sell that war to the American people. Abe Schultze, if you want to know the name of the PR genius. They did focus groups on the war. They wanted the war all the time. They had to figure out how to sell the war to the American people, how to scare the shit out of the American people. It was a phony war. Where did that war come from? You know what? It's quite surprising. That war came from Netanyahu, actually. You know that? It's weird. And the way it is that Netanyahu had from 1995 onward the theory that the only way we're going to get rid of Hamas and Hezbollah is by toppling the governments that support them. That's Iraq, Syria, and Iran. And the guy's nothing if not obsessive. And he's still trying to get us to fight Iran this day, this week. He's a deep, dark son of a bitch, sorry to tell you. Because he's gotten us into endless wars.
Trump posted this.
And because of the power of all of this in the U.S. politics, he's gotten his way. But that war was totally phony. So what is this democracy versus dictatorship? Come on. These are not even sensible terms.
Yeah, like that's a very loaded sort of hot topic, and I haven't done enough research on it. But like this idea of this clean break memo done for Netanyahu, where he wanted to take out all these countries, and then having sort of pro-Israeli people in the American administration basically almost got America to carry that out. Look, I don't know this for sure, and it's obviously a bit controversial. I'd love to know what you take of this idea that maybe Iraq was maybe more for Israel, and that's sort of the result of the American-Israeli alliance, as opposed to anything good.
I don't doubt that Israel was looking for a fight with Iraq, given the situation between them and everything that was going on. I think that the idea that Israel was the reason that
there's many reasons.
Iraq is just. I think that's far-fetched. We didn't. Israel didn't convince us. They weren't the reason that we went to Iraq. We had our own things going on there. So, you can that's like saying, my son made me punch this guy over here. He talked me into doing something wrong. Israel is obviously very influential in our global strategies in general. I do think
foreign policy,
very much so.
Like the Iraq War.
We are also very influential in theirs, and that can also be said of any country in Europe or any of our other allies. I think there's some give and take on some of those things, and sometimes when the stars and our goals align just right. I think some of those. I do want to address this comment right here, because I always see Zionism kind of thrown out there as a pejorative, and this is some of the things that you and I were talking about prior to this, Chris, about how I don't understand. Zionism is hiding its crime behind Judaism and Christianity. Okay, I don't know what that really means, and feel free to, and I'm not attacking you in any way, Stratocat. Zionism, as far as I understand it, is the idea that Israel has the right to exist. I think that is true. And I mean, I guess I am a Zionist, I guess.
I guess it has different meanings to different people, because originally a Zionist was like Theodor Herzl, like before the modern state of Israel was created. Zionism was simply the movement that the Jewish people should have a homeland somewhere, and we're going to work towards that happening. That's what the original Zionists were. And nowadays it's generally used to mean anyone who supports Israel. But for other people, it's more the ideology. I don't know if it was originally linked to that actual land.
So I don't know if it was or not, but Zionism is a Jewish nationalist movement that originated in Europe in the 19th century with the goal of the creation and support of
I think it was in response to the pogroms in the Soviet Union and stuff like that. They were getting persecuted even before Hitler.
100%. The goal of the creation and support of a Jewish national state in Palestine, the ancient homeland of the Jews, through Zionism. So I think it was always attached to the original, area that was designated as Israel back to biblical times. But
so I think, I was just going to.
No, go ahead. Sorry, I'm stepping on you.
Zionism, so a lot of people, it's sort of this idea that land belongs to them, not just what they got. So they only got what they could sort of fight for, but you'll talk to probably people in the chat saying they should have Gaza. They don't even call it West Bank, a lot of them. They call it Judea and Samaria, as it was known 2,000 years ago. So that's where the idea of this concept of Greater Israel come from. It's like we really want the West Bank and Gaza, and also a bit of Jordan, a bit more Egypt, and basically the Egypt from back in the day was a lot bigger than what it was now. So for some people, Zionism not only means supporting of Israel, but Israeli expansionism and all other things that get attached to it. And that's, I think, what we see playing out with kicking the people of Gaza out and attacking. I mean, I know it's complicated with Syria and Lebanon and all their neighbors, but I think Israeli policy is pushing towards expansion and some kind of almost imperialism. Maybe that's not the right word, but Zionism, it means different things to different people. And for some people, it's sort of like a Jewish supremacy. We entitled to this land and more land, which we're going to fight for.
Well,
so that's why it has a negative connotation sometimes.
Even going back to, Bibi Netanyahu, I see Bibi as a guy that is fanatical about defending Israel and ensuring Israel's survival. I think, and I don't project as much. I don't know. I don't know that he is like this evil character that so many people make him out to be, and I think that you even feel that he is to some extent.
Definitely.
I just don't see that. I think that he is somebody
Satan Yahoo
radical. That is, you can call him a radical Israeli patriot. And I think you can say what you want from there. I do want to address, and I think this is an interesting conversation. I think that we were talking a little bit prior to this about the concerns. When you start talking about Israel, obviously there's an anti-Semitic. Look, people conflate anti-Semitism, I believe, with people that are having genuine political criticisms of Israel, and I think that is definitely, like, nobody likes being criticized. So there's definitely Israelis and there's definitely Jewish people that automatically feel that if you're criticizing Israel, you are doing so because you're anti-Semitic, and I think that's unfair. But there is an element, we're kind of, one of the analogies I gave prior to the show is like, look, at the end of the day, I think like 80% of America doesn't care. Like, they're completely agnostic for the most part when it comes to Israel. And then you have 10% on one side that are extremely Zionist in nature, very pro-Israeli. A majority of those are Jews, obviously. Then you have a lot of Christians and things like that. And I think probably that gap in the middle is probably too large. It's probably about 60% of the American don't care. And then we have the other sides of it. And then the other side of that is, you have people, mostly leftists, some conservatives too, but mostly leftists that are anti-Israel from a political standpoint. But then within that, there's definitely a huge portion of those that are coming from a completely anti-Semitic stance. So that's where I think some of that comes from. So, it's easy to get those things conflated, but I don't think that it's anti-Semitic to criticize Israel and what they're doing or anything else. We shouldn't look at that unless you are genuinely anti-Semitic. Now, when you start, I don't know. And one of the things you were talking about a little bit that I think is interesting too, is you were talking about, there is, and it's worth mentioning because there is a large Jewish representation within the media, right? So what does that mean though, at the end of the day? Like, does that mean that the Jews run media or the Jews run Hollywood? I don't. And even if
they have a disproportionate influence,
what does that mean? Like, so they have put themselves there because they want to use their position to support Israel. And if that's the case, then who cares? Like, that's what everybody does. Everybody positions, if they're really passionate. And we see this, look, Democrats and liberals and socialists and communists here in this country have done this way better than any Jewish person on the face of the planet, as far as I'm concerned, have put themselves strategically in academia and the media and everywhere else, and have swayed America to move in a direction that, I don't think most people ever realize. So,
I guess if people
understand, I guess to some extent, I don't understand anti-Semitism to begin with. I don't know what the beef is, or what the real argument is against Jews to begin with. And I've heard it all. It's not that I haven't heard it. I don't understand where people are coming from on that.
Well, yeah, that's a tough one. I guess, I suppose if you're against Israel like I am, and you have, a number of Jewish people in the media basically trying to convince Americans to support Israel, which I think is kind of a bad thing to do, then you sort of look at that and go, I don't think there should be so many Jewish people in media, perhaps. Which is that an anti-Semitic thing to say? But we're talking about a very small minority of Jewish people. So just because you mightn't like some people in the news that are propagandists, or some people in the government that are like war hawks with a strong allegiance to Israel, you can, I have a problem with a lot of these people, but that's, they're only a handful of people. I can point them out by name. So then to make the jump from,
well, I mean,
I don't like those people, so I don't like all of them, that's a bit of a stretch, but that's where people go, I guess.
Yeah, they do. And conversely, there are definitely people that are like, I don't like that person because they're Jewish. But you don't like, regardless if they're Jewish or not, you don't like someone in the media, or as many people in the media, pushing for the American
things I disagree with. Yeah.
It really has nothing to do with the fact that they're Jewish. I mean, they just happen. A lot of those happen to be Jewish. But the point is if they were out there saying that we're agreeing with you on your politics and they were Jewish, you wouldn't have a problem with that. And again, I've never understood this whole idea that there's this cabal of, it reminds me of like Freemasonry and everything else. Like there's this cabal, which clearly you're part of, with given your checkered background back there. This cabal that where these Jews are controlling the banking system, and they're controlling this and they're controlling that. And, and I've read I've gone down the rabbit holes and like trying to understand this stuff. And it just seems so ridiculous to me. But maybe I'm naive. I don't know, but I don't think, I just don't understand. It's as simple as that.
Well, I guess people look at all the politicians on the Democrats and the Republicans. They all speak at AIPAC. They all speak at all these Israel sort of lobbies. They all get a lot of money from, I don't know how. I don't think they get the money directly, but AIPAC, they supports their campaigns and will go after their primary their challenges, and all this kind of stuff. So people say, oh, basically you've sort of got pro-Jewish groups buying off politicians, which is sort of a pro-Israeli or maybe even pro-Jewish corruption, maybe. Because, Trump he got, another part of this, Trump got a lot of money from the Adelson family. He had Sheldon Adelson last time around, gave him maybe $100 million, or I'm not sure the exact amount. And, of course, Trump did heaps of things for Israel. He moved the embassy to Jerusalem and recognized the Iranian, whatever that, acronym is, their military, I guess it is, as a terrorist group, and recognize the Golan Heights. Someone mentioned earlier when we were talking about Israel expansion and Zionism wanting to get more land, he sort of mentioned, didn't they get the West Bank from the Six-Day War? Yeah, they got the West Bank, Gaza, and the Golan Heights. The world never recognised any of it because they started that war in 1967. People argue about this. Israel will say that Nasser was being provocative and something to do with shutting the Suez Canal, and he was putting troops on his border. But Israel launched the first shot, and they invaded Egypt. They started a war, in my opinion. People debate this. But they invaded, they shot the first shot, and at the end, they came away with all this extra land, which they still sort of hold on to this day. And yeah, Trump was basically paid a fair bit of money. And I don't know if it's connected, but I mean, I think that's how politics works. He then, in turn, recognized those Golan Heights, which America had never done before. The world has never done. The rest of the world still doesn't recognize. It's part of Syria. So he did a bunch of things there. And then this time around, because I think Sheldon died, but his widow, she's still got heaps of money. I think Trump gave her the Medal of Freedom last time, and I think now he might be doing things for Israel to pay them back, which I think is a bit corrupt, you know?
Well, I think you see a lot of the conservatives often siding with Israel and supporting Israel initiatives, you know, because there is a you're going to see much more, a lot of the conservative side are evangelicals, and you are going to see a more pro-Israel attitude.
Yeah, they don't need to be. A lot of them wouldn't need to be paid to have that opinion.
Like I don't think that a lot of these people are insincere about their support of Israel because, you know, I know a lot of things been thrown around whether Israel's paying them money or, you know, Israel is, you know, whatever, you know, and of course we have things like the Jeffrey Epstein issue going on, which supposedly is linked to Mossad, all those things. And then somebody I know, I do think this is a true statement. And again, I don't really see the problem with it. Like, look, if you are if you are Jewish, like hardcore Jewish, and again, you're reading the Torah and you are a practicing Jew, and you think about the ancient days of Israel, Jerusalem, and all those other things, you know, wanting to reestablish that kingdom, I think is a natural thing. You know, I don't know what's going to happen to America in the next 50 years, but, you know, I'd like to think that if, you know, suddenly America was broken up and then, you know, history books 500 years from now, these people that are determined Americans or whatever, I don't even know what they would be called, you know, a long time from now, but, you know, go back and look at the golden years of America, you know, would have this longing to go back and reestablish the United States if that took place. So I think that's natural. I don't know that but it's just weird to me that like these nefarious intents would be assigned to some of these desires that I think that if you were Jewish, you would have them too. And it's not like some, I don't know. It gets weird.
Yeah, just quickly, this, as I mentioned, the 1967, you know, this is sort of the other side that the Arabs were surrounding Israel. So Israel, as they said, they did launch a preemptive attack. I'm not sure that Egypt was about to attack Israel or the other neighbors. But yeah, that's the other side of that. But basically, they did.
You sure are a war-losing apologist, Chris. Those were friendly tanks, just like the friendly Japanese were about to give up. Those were filled with freaking roses.
I mean, countries are allowed to put tanks within their own borders, and
well,
you know,
if they're on the border and they're pointing at your direction and they're making threats, I mean, I think a preemptive strike is necessary.
Yeah, but that goes both ways. Israel's pointing their guns at a lot of their neighbors, and you know,
that's true. And we could you know, all shoot it out and figure out where the chips lie in the end. I don't know. It's going to be very beneficial to most people.
I just want to share this little clip of Thomas Massey. Someone mentioned there about Thomas Massey mentioned the AIPAC handlers that basically all Republicans have. This is an amazing clip. And surprise, surprise, AIPAC targeted Massey. They spent a bit of money to try and get him to lose his seat in the election, which is just outrageous to me. AIPAC, people say, oh, they don't even spend that much money.
Hold on, let's talk about that. Why is that outrageous to you that AIPAC would be targeting someone to lose an election that was was speaking out against AIPAC. I mean, that's what every lobbyist does.
But it's basically a foreign lobby. It's a lobby for another country buying off American politicians to support a country other than America. Imagine a Chinese lobby doing that. Imagine a Russian lobby. Imagine an Iranian lobby doing that, primarying anyone that says anything bad about Iran.
I'll concede to that. That's actually a pretty good point. That's the first good point you made all night.
Clip that, everyone. All right. Save that. Play it. That'll be the new intro for the show, actually. Might get rid of my music. We'll just have... That was a good point. But, yeah. So this is only a minute clip. And, because people say, well, American politicians are more predisposition towards Israel anyway, which is true, but I just think this is an extra influence, and politicians know they better go along with Israel, otherwise they're going to have some problems. And that works for a lot of them because they support Israel anyway.
All right, so I'll look at, because you kind of brought up a good point on the it's a lobbyist for a foreign country. So I was curious to see what other countries have lobbyist groups here in the United States. Let's see.
I think they might have to register as a foreign. And I think AIPAC gets away with it because they are American citizens doing the lobbying, but they're lobbying on behalf of Israel.
Well, that would be weird. I would have a problem with that. Does AIPAC have to register as foreign agent? Bill requires those funds or act on behalf of foreign governments to register as a foreign agent. However, AIPAC states that the organization is a registered American lobbying group funded by private donations and maintains it receives no financial assistance from Israel or any other foreign group.
So it's not registered. And that's how they do it. They say, well, technically they are American citizens doing the lobbying, but it's the American Israeli Political Action Committee. The Israel part's quite important in all that, and that's all they ever lobby for is for Israel. I think Thomas Massey said they should be registered as a foreign, whatever that acronym is, a foreign lobby group or whatever it is. FARA, is it? I think.
Yes, the Foreign Agents Registration Act.
And this taps into some so-called, I guess they are so-called anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. If you're ready to go for a bit of a loop, even with JFK, some people say he was trying to register AIPAC, or the predecessor, AIPAC before they were called AIPAC. Kennedy was apparently trying to get them to register as a foreign agent. And the conspiracy theories, which I don't think are good enough, they basically say Israel killed him to stop that. I think that's a bit of a stretch. But there you go. There's another conspiracy theory for you people out there who enjoy hearing all kind of different theories.
Well, I don't know that it's a conspiracy theory. It's just the American Israeli Public Affairs Committee, AIPAC, is a pro-Israel lobbying group that advocates its policies to the legislative and executive branch of the United States. I don't know how that would change anything. I would like to see what, if it did change anything, how it would change something in the way they operate other than having to be registered. I mean,
I can't remember offhand. I think there is some things that go along with it that are quite important, but I can't remember what them are.
Being registered as under FARA. I'm sure there are. I just don't know how consequential those differences would be.
It would make it harder to do what they're doing, I think. They'd be less effective as just, hey, we're just Americans that love Israel because Israel shares our Judeo-Christian values and all that kind of stuff. But I'm not a huge fan. And I think basically, look, if I think America should stay out of this, they shouldn't be giving money to Palestine, they shouldn't be giving money to Israel. They should basically say to Israel, look, it's up to you to make peace with your neighbors and do what you got to do. We ain't going to bail you out. I'd get behind that. I think I'd like to see politicians propose that, but I don't think they would survive. I think that'd be the end of their career if they even dared suggesting that. It's like when Trump stopped the aid, it's except for Israel and Egypt, because he probably, I think I mentioned in a previous episode, he probably wants Egypt to do something like help the ethnic cleansing of Gaza. We'll keep the aid going to you and Israel. I think you should stop foreign aid all over the place. But,
we definitely need to roll back foreign aid. There's no doubt about it. I don't know that I agree with this, MPCV. Look, I think China has a lot of power, money, and influence, and the difference between China and some of these other countries, but specifically China, At least AIPAC does it openly. China is doing it through a lot of different other ways. Number one, they're buying up land in the United States like it's going on a sale business. They're doing a lot of things that affect. China has a greater effect on the United States than Israel, I think, by far, between the production of some of our required goods, everything from steel to components to electronics. I think China, like whatever influence Israel has on us doesn't bother me. The influence that China has on us scares me to death. Yeah, I think that I guarantee you, I know for a fact there's more money involved in politics, in local and national politics, and not just politics, but regulations and policies and things like that China has its hands in that Israel would just never be able to, just because of its industrial and might through commerce, right? So China scares me much more than Israel does by any chance. I do think that we need to do whatever we can to limit any country's ability to influence us. It is a little interesting that AIPAC doesn't have to register as a foreign agent because they are lobbying on behalf of another country. I think they probably should. I just don't know what relevance that has to the discussion to begin with.
Yeah, I'd have to look at what the consequences of that are, but it would I imagine it would be harder to just have the influence they have if it was sort of openly a foreign.
Wouldn't be able to have all of the, and I've seen some political ads and things like that are clearly funded by AIPAC. I don't know if they would be able to do that, and I don't know.
Yeah. And they spend a lot on ads. Yeah. But yeah, I've got a clip because obviously.
Before you get to that, real quick, apparently China owns 384,000 acres of American agricultural land, and I bet that number is much larger than that. That's probably what they overtly own. I bet they
are they Chinese citizens or Chinese companies that are potentially controlled by China. How would that work? The idea of surely the Chinese government doesn't buy pieces of land, do they? I imagine it's probably Chinese companies that are sort of, China can take them over, I guess, if they want.
Yeah.
There'd be Chinese companies, which is bad. We have a similar thing here in Australia. I think we've let them take some ports and stuff like that, which is no good, obviously.
I was working in in Mexico City. My interpreter was talking about how every skyscraper in Mexico City, for instance, almost all the large companies and stuff there were actually owned by China, and how China had been coming in for many years. And this is in 2019, how China had been coming in many, many years and just buying up companies, and they'll just fire all the Mexicans, and then they'll actually bring in their own workers, and they just live in these skyscrapers doing whatever. I don't know how true that is. I was looking up to see how much land China owns in Mexico, because that's another problem too. But because I know they have a huge influence in Mexico, in Central and South America as well, and Africa. They're huge in Africa.
Yeah, and that might have another thing to do with this too. This is just a quick tangent or whatever, but because China's doing their Belt and Road initiative, and they're doing up roads and ports and doing deals with all kind of countries to sort of facilitate trade routes back to them. I think Gaza, because there's a bear with me. There's a sort of an Israeli plan of Gaza 2035. Sorry, bear with me. Where is it? Israel. Yeah, where basically it's similar to Trump's plan, where they basically want to get rid of the people and sort of just completely redesign the city as somewhat of an international city. And I think that ties into trade routes and rail and ports and all this kind of stuff to counter that Chinese trade route, which, this is more geopolitical stuff. I don't know all the details of it, but where are we? I think this is an aspect of what we're hearing from Trump, this idea of making some sort of international city that's good for international trade, and that's sort of more of an that plays a part in what we're seeing, as opposed to like some humanitarian solution, which is sort of how it's being presented. But really, it's like, kicking all the people out. Some people will call that ethnic cleansing, to give Israel exactly what they want and perhaps do some kind of good thing that's good for business and American interests and all this kind of stuff. It just doesn't seem very ethical to me, all this. So people can look into that. Gaza 2035, and I think it's got something to do with the trade routes, maybe combating China's influence on the world. That could be another aspect of all this kind of stuff. I do have a news clip here about the Trump thing, because I don't think we'll have time to get through much of the big presser, but I've got a news clip sort of summing it up. And, it's an Australian news clip too, so I'll show you a bit of Australian media. It's actually a pretty good summary. So I may as well show that, just to sort of show his main comments, which we haven't shown yet, where Trump's standing next to Netanyahu about owning Gaza. So you ready for a bit of Australian government-funded media?
I'd love to see it.
It's actually not a bad clip.
Donald Trump's plan to permanently resettle Palestinians from Gaza and for the US to take over and rebuild the territory is drawing widespread international criticism as the administration tries to sell the controversial strategy.
The U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip, and we will do a job with it too. We'll own it.
That was the extraordinary remark from President Trump standing beside the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
He went into more details of like clearing out the unexploded mines and like flattening the area and then rebuilding. His envoy was it Wilkoff that sort of helped with the deal. He'd sort of said this would take 5 years to happen, so the Gazans would have to stay in Egypt and Jordan for at least 5 years, and maybe they can come back. Anyway, I just had to insert that before I go back to it.
The man who ordered Israel's almost continuous bombardment of Gaza in the war against Hamas. Arab nations are opposing the idea of taking in displaced Gazans, a sentiment echoed by the head of the United Nations.
In the search for solutions, we must not make the problem worse.
Americans love the UN, right?
It is vital to stay true to the bedrock of international law. It is essential to avoid any form of ethnic cleansing.
Here they go.
A day after the major policy shift, the top US diplomat, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, insisted the president's vision to bring peace to the region is genuine.
It's a unique offer, one that no other country in the world has stepped up and made an offer. But I think it's one people need to think about. Seriously, it was not meant as a hostile move. It was meant as I think, a very generous move, the offer to rebuild and to be in charge of the rebuilding of a place, many parts of which right now, even if people move back, they would have nowhere to live safely because there are still unexploded munitions and debris and rubble.
The Gaza Strip is a Palestinian enclave on the eastern coast of the Mediterranean Sea. It covers roughly 360 square kilometres. Much of it borders Israel, apart from Egypt in the south. The population of Gaza is estimated at 2.3 million people. The territory is controlled by...
That made me think too, because Trump said, look, there's 1.7, 1.8 million people will have to move out of there. I'm like, is that just a mistake, or has Israel killed like 500,000 people or something? You know what I mean? I don't know, maybe I'm reading too much into that, but yeah, they say it used to be 2.3 million, but Trump's floating it's only 1.87, 1.8. I guess maybe some have already left, but most of them are pretty much still there. They haven't really had anywhere to go.
Or he's saying that, there's going to be, a couple 100,000 that are going to stay there.
But he did also say all of them have to go. All of them. He specifically asked, and he said, all of them. They all got to go, and they wouldn't want to stay there anyway. Why would they? It's all death. It's all this, that, the other.
Well,
it's very naive, I think. If he doesn't believe, I don't think he believes what he's saying. Some people would want to stay. Some people, and I think this clip, good old ABC lefty government media, will show you. We'll see some Palestinians that want to stay in their homes. So I want to represent their voices, make sure they're represented on this, American rah-rah kind of show.
by the militant group Hamas, which started the war when it carried out a coordinated attack on southern Israel on October the 7th, 2023. A ceasefire, which came into effect a fortnight ago, has allowed many Palestinians to return to what's left of their homes. They're flatly rejecting Donald Trump's plan.
We are staying here. Where else should we go? We don't want to go to America or any other place. We want to stay in our land and our home country. We are staying here and dying here. This is our land, our country, and our life.
Dying here is better. It's better than going anywhere else because you have nothing after losing your land, country, and home. Although it's demolished, our homes are worth the whole world for us. We've lived and seen a lot, but since we've seen our homes, all the sadness within us left. We felt safe.
About 2/3 of Gaza's pre-war structures, or about 170,000 buildings, have been damaged or flattened during 16 months of conflict. A recent assessment carried out by the United Nations estimated the cost of clearing more than 50 million tonnes of rubble would be up to $1.9 billion and take more than 20 years. Much of the debris is riddled with asbestos. Human remains are also within the rubble. Palestinian authorities estimate up to 10,000 bodies are missing. The UN says the war in Gaza has put development in the...
Hey.
Scroll back just a little bit to where that showed the guy on top of that, basically that right there. Yeah. So you can see they're actually just still living in there. You got all their clothes hung up. I mean, it's a sad state. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah. And see, Trump's sort of ignoring this. Like there's something that's ignoring human nature.
Have to some of this stuff. You know, so I don't remember when I was watching, they were talking about how, you know, presidents and even some leaders and stuff, you know, shouldn't tour battlefields and things like that. And I think there's some truth to that. Like you got to step back and be able to make decisions without a lot of emotions in play, and you can't let sympathy draw you into making, you know, you got to kind of put that off to the side and make decisions that are just aren't based on emotions. And like, hey, because I do think emotional decisions end up drawing some of these things out. And while it might feel like the kindest thing to do in the moment, it's not the kindest thing to do long term. So, you know, I don't know. I'm sure Trump is actually seeing a lot of this, and I'm you know, regardless of what we're saying. I mean, he has to say one thing in front, and he could be saying something else behind. He could be saying something. He could be making statements behind closed doors that are emotional like this, but then, you know, setting that off to the side and saying, hey, look, this is what probably needs to be done for long-term prosperity, peace, and health and safety of everybody. I don't know what his calculus is behind his decision making on all this.
Yeah, it's a tough one. Yeah, you can't judge by emotion, but still, I think right and wrong, which the idea of getting people out of their homes sort of falls into a little bit. And it works both ways too. A lot of the October 7th stuff is very emotional. A lot of responses that people want from that are quite emotional.
Yeah.
I might finish this video. I think there's a clip. Okay, there's this. Israel hates this woman. I forget her title. Something from the UN. I actually don't mind it.
Yes.
Of course, economic development must happen. Of course, cooperation is necessary, but not at the expense of fundamental rights and freedoms. What
was that?
I said I hate her already. Just her voice. I wonder you like her.
Was she like? Was she Italian or something?
That
sounds like anti-Italian prejudice to me. I mean, that's the only thing I hear in the voice. Just a bit of a. Anyway.
Israel, the United States, more openly
Israel
than
says she's
ever,
anti-Semitic,
and others seems to expect that the Palestinians will accept. Like all indigenous people in the world, the Palestinian will never surrender.
Before and after drone shots above Gaza show the devastation from the conflict. But it appears the idea of creating the Riviera of the Middle East, featuring a resort where international communities could coexist, is not so new. Almost a year ago, Donald Trump's son-in-law and former aide, Jared Kushner, spoke about the value of land in Gaza during a discussion at Harvard University.
Gaza's waterfront property. It could be very valuable to if people would focus on kind of building up livelihoods. You think about all the money that's gone into this tunnel network and into all the munitions. If that would have gone into education or innovation, what could have been done? And so I think that it's a little bit of an unfortunate situation there. But I think from Israel's perspective, I would do my best to move the people out and then clean it up.
So I think it's been the plan for a while.
I mean, there are some real legitimate points being made. The billions of dollars that have went into foreign aid from a multitude of countries, including the United States, that have went into Palestine, that have been turned into weapons of war. Whether we're talking about war infrastructure, tunnels, things like that, they were strategically creating to infiltrate Israel and to conduct terrorist operations. That can't just be swept under the rug. That is legitimate. So, I don't know, man. The fact is, it's an extremely complicated situation that we're obviously not going to solve here. And there is no good solution, I don't think. There are solutions to where, peace ultimately exists, but I don't think anyone is going to find them palatable. I think that's ultimately, and look, I think, Trump is just trying to make Gaza great again. So there's that.
Just without the Gazans, I suppose.
Well, maybe that's what you need to make Gaza great, is you just can't have any Palestinians there. I'm joking. Man. Yeah, there's a lot going on.
No, but it does make sense, to kick them all out and then for Israel to take over and investors and, they could obviously make it a better place or whatever, but it's more complicated than that. And there's, more other factors to consider, I think, and moral issues.
Well, I mean, the fact is, I won't say fact. There's some believe that we're doing that here in the United States, in South Carolina, Maui, and the Palisades now. So, it's not like, and I hope that's not the case, but there's some crazy things going on in the U.S. as well as far as that goes. What appears to be engineered displacement of people, so that land can be redeveloped in different ways. I don't know that's true, and I hope it's not. But I can't take off everything points to that, in my opinion. I have a hard time removing my tinfoil hat. I do want to go back real quick, and I know this is kind of off topic, but back to this China thing, because China owns or operates nearly 100 ports in over 50 countries, spanning every ocean and every continent. And then we go up here. So and to include in the U.S., by the way. If we go down here, we have 129 port projects total, port projects outside China with Chinese investment, 17 port projects with major Chinese ownership, and then 14 port projects with majority Chinese ownership where there is physical potential for naval use. So even if we look over here at United States, apparently there's 5 ports that China has some control over. I found that in another article, even here in the United States. And right now it's only showing, looks like 3. But I don't know if these are port projects or actual ports that are already established. I don't even know where North Abaco Island is. But regardless, China has been quietly taking over the world and even taking over the United States in many ways that we just haven't been paying attention to.
Yeah, we had some Australian ports there too. I think it's at over 50%, somewhere near Sydney or whatever.
Yeah,
we definitely got to stop.
Australia is what the United States needs to be doing. Australia, Canada.
Do we have to be kicked out first, or what? How's that going to work?
It just depends on your attitudes.
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to make it. I think I'm a little bit. I'm not enough of a US bootlicker to survive such a thing.
We'll give you some of these freaking American goodies like our health care and a little bit of welfare. We'll throw you a free iPhone. The next thing you know, you'll be waving that American flag, dressing up like the Statue of Liberty every Halloween.
Sure.
Well,
not when America's complicit in the ethnic cleansing of the poor people.
Dear God. Real quick, I promise, I'm sure he's gone, but Wagnum 17. So, Gary, do you have any experience with the Athlon Cronus PTR? I won't bust your balls for misspelling that. BTR Gen 2. Yes, we have those in stock. I haven't done a full review on them. We had our dealer rep come out and show those to us. That was one of the reasons I need to do a full review on it. Both the Ares and the Cronus. The Cronus is their higher end. It was extremely it was good. It was good from what I saw. I need to do a full review on it and do a more in depth. Our dealer rep has been shooting PRS for a really long time. He's been using the Cronus and the Ares for a long time, and he's a guy that I trust. He was a real straight shooter. He showed me some other products that he said, look, this is garbage. So anyways, that's where I stand on that. We have them in stock. I need to do a more full review on those. I also got some really concerning news on the SIG Kilo 10K Gen 2s today that I'm going to make sure I got everything straight from this person that contacted me on that. It's regarding their warranty. And anyways, I may be producing a video on that in the next couple of days as well. But I also got a couple of videos back there that I'm working on, folks. So I was doing all day today. Shot a video yesterday. I still got 3 or 4 videos coming from SHOT Show that I'm working on as well. But got a lot of stuff going on. So what else, Chris? Got any last words before we close this thing down? We're going a solid 2 hours here.
Yeah, I might have one more clip. It's actually funny. Someone's done a meme out of a Tom and Jerry video. Might be a funny way to, but it's also smuggled in some anti-Israel propaganda, which I always like to spread around. You know, so might end with that one. Apparently, there's a bunch of. It's mainly to do with the, I guess, gas and resources that are found around Gaza and off the water there, and it's could well have a factor in all this. I'm not sure, but this video argues that it does.
Gas off the coast of Gaza. The natural gas is spread over 1.4 trillion cubic feet.
Many months later,
geologists have confirmed that the West Bank is rich in high-quality oil and water supplies, while Gaza is rich in natural gas. The estimated cost of the occupation related to oil and natural gas is valued at $500 billion. Till now, Israel has successfully occupied and controlled water and oil resources. Currently, there are plans to develop Gaza's maritime gas field, as announced by Netanyahu in June 2023. Soon after declaring war against Hamas in October, Israel granted licenses to 6 companies for the development of the Gaza's gas field. Clearly, their aim is to become a net exporter of natural gas. However, the Palestinian people are seen as problematic to the proposed agenda, so Israel wants to take control over Gaza Strip in the name of self-defense against terrorism and utilize Gaza's marine gas field, similar to what was done during the 2014 war. Some countries are supporting this genocide because they are major shareholders of the 6 involved companies, either directly or indirectly through relatives. The USA and the UK support Israel also because of companies like Boeing and British Aerospace, which provide arms to the Israeli forces used in Gaza. Countries not linked to these companies are supporting Israel due to the benefits that will be derived from the Ben Gurion Canal project.
That's all theory. I should say I haven't checked any of that.
Wow, you
it
sure
could be all nonsense.
Didn't mind spreading some anti-Semitic propaganda, did you? Didn't check that out. I gotta say, the whole tone of that didn't give it any credibility. There is Israel. They were gonna move everybody out and kill everyone and genocide and gas lines and da. And look at all this people and countries that support it. Oh my God. Yeah.
I didn't think it was going to win you over, but I thought it'd be a nice way to go with some Tom and Jerry anti-Israel propaganda.
That is this Tom and Jerry. That was definitely funded by freaking Hamas. Good job on that. Terrorist propaganda.
That's why they said Netanyahu or something. Anyway.
Here's what I'll tell you guys on any of this stuff. Again, we are very careful about the stuff that we carry. I do try to make sure that almost every element of every brand that we carry, we've done some reviews on. At the end of the day, if you buy stuff from us, we're gonna take care of you. That's as simple as that, and that's what we ended up doing today. We ran into an issue with a SIG Kilo 10K Gen 2. And I got to tell you, right now I'm not super impressed with SIG's supposed forever warranty on their electronics. So again, I'm waiting for the client to send me a detailed information. I don't want to get any of that wrong, and make sure, and I'm going to verify some things with SIG before I post any haterade in their direction. But that was one of the things I was concerned about. Anyways, folks, Chris, got anything else? Anything else? Any other terrorist propaganda you want to release before we say goodnight? Have we?
No, I probably should just leave it at one. You know, like I don't want to go too heavy with the terrorist propaganda. Just slip that one in at the end. It's probably enough.
Hold on.
You missed the first one.
Mark in the documentary. Oh, Jason.
You missed this one too. I put it up before. Of course, an Aussie would believe it.
All right, folks. Well, if you're not more informed, hopefully you were at least somewhat entertained. We appreciate you guys coming out. Share the show. That'll really help us more than anything. If you want to like, subscribe, that's great. But share the show. That's what we need. Oh, and if you're not following me on X, I'd appreciate if you did. Paramount Actual. Again, I just kind of dumped the old X account, and I have the new one, and I got like a whopping 250 followers or something like that. We got to get those rookie numbers up. So anyways, all right, folks, thanks you guys for coming in. Any final words, Chris?
Oh yeah, check me out too. I'm on Twitter. I've got way more followers than Gary. At Chris Todd Nolan.
He does. What about I had over 5,000 on my other account. You there on that one? Where you at?
Look, we shouldn't be burdened by what has. We must be unburdened by what has been. That's the past. That's long gone. That's like the old state of Palestine.
It still
we just got to get with it.
It still exists. Still exists.
True.
Yeah, X definitely censors. I had like 2 videos that were blocked, and there's nothing on there. They're about, I don't know what they said, this was violent content or something. It was about guns, but it was weird that anyways, it was blocked. Anyways, enough of that, folks. Check us out on Monday. We'll be coming back at you Monday, 8 p.m. Eastern time. Wednesday, we'll have the Dangerous Liberty podcast. Oh, folks, we got Dr. Sean Baker, the guy, the carnivore diet man, coming on. And I'm really excited about to have him on to talk. So that's going to be a big one on Wednesday. So if you want to know more about the carnivore diet, if you want to know the facts behind saturated fats, if you want to know the facts behind statin drugs, make sure you join us Wednesday, 7 p.m. We will have Dr. Sean Baker, and it's going to be a great show. But until next time, stay armed, stay ready. We'll talk to you guys soon.